Hello, BookTube. Well, by something like popular demand, I guess I am continuing with my chapter by chapter read through of Lord of the Rings. Not really expecting that I would do that. David Wiley and Tony from An Erudite Adventure and I teamed up to do The Two Towers. Um, and instead of doing a video a week, I did a chapter every day, and I enjoyed the process a lot. But I kind of halfway thought that we would stop after that it would just be that. But I really enjoyed it, and a lot of you apparently did too, because I've been hearing quite a bit about where is it, where is this? We're moving on to Return of the King, which is the third part of the Lord of the Rings. We finished with the story with a broken narrative. The first half of the Two Towers, the second part of Lord of the Rings, is all of our main heroes, minus two. All of our main heroes are together. The wizard Gandalf, Aragorn, the heir to the throne of the West. We have the hobbits, Merry and Pippin. We have Legolas the elf and Gimli the dwarf. And they've had lots of adventures in that first part, and it culminating in battles that they fight alongside the heroic men of Rohan and the defeat of the evil wizard Saruman. And at the end of that section of the Two Towers, a ghastly sight wheels overhead, a winged Nazgul. A Nazgul, one of the nine riders, only on a big, monstrous winged creature. Meaning that the Nazgul have crossed the river Anduin, and that they are certainly the harbingers of a major military advance from Sauron, the Dark Lord of Mordor, the actual titular Lord of the Rings, who, in addition to wanting the sorceress MacGuffin back, his one ring, also wants to wage conventional war on the Kingdom of Gondor, which is Rohan's ally. The Kingdom of Gondor is much older and much grander and is much closer to Mordor. It's right across a pass from Mordor, so they are constantly at daggers drawn with each other. And the appearance of that winged Nazgul changes the tenor of Gandalf's level of alarm. He has been the persistent voice of warning to the West that the time of ignoring Sauron is over, that the danger has now come, the world as you know it is over. And at the moment that creature passes overhead, Gandalf bursts into what in any other character I would call panic, and says that we need to move. Everybody needs to move now. The hammer is about to hit the anvil. We need to flee in all directions. We need to make sure that we're doing what we need to do. And what he needs to do is hasten to Gondor right away, with maximum speed. What he needs now is maximum speed, which means his mighty horse Shadowfax, who is the king, the lord of all horses. He is far greater and stronger and faster than any of the horses of the Rohirrim. Gandalf wants to hasten to Gondor with, as he puts it, the speed of the wind. And he takes with him one of the two hobbits, Pippin. Mainly because he doesn't want Pippin anywhere around the Palantir, which we have already seen. We saw that at the end of the Two Towers. A mystic object, an indestructible stone, one of 7 that was brought out of the destruction of Numenor by the men of the West, and that was in Orthanc, the citadel of the evil wizard Saruman. It comes into the possession of our good guys, but it's a mighty dangerous thing, because these stones can talk to each other over long distances, and they can see each other, and their owners can become aware of each other. And there's one in Sauron's stronghold, and he became aware of Pippin looking into that stone. So Gandalf thinks it's best that he be away from that stone, that he not be tempted. So he takes Pippin with him on the Shadowfax, and they ride like crazy for Gondor. And then the narrative in the Two Towers stops. That narrative stops, and we move to Frodo, the hobbit Frodo, and Sam, his servant, and the creature Gollum, who we first meet with the ring in The Hobbit, making their way on foot to Mordor to destroy the ring in Mount Doom, where it was created, where it was forged. And we go through all of their adventures. We cross the dead marshes with them. We cross the deserts with them. We take an alternate path with them that allows them to meet Faramir, a man of Gondor, and his armed troop. We see an Oliphant. And we have to deal with Shelob, a spider-like monster of ancient evil who is not aligned with Sauron at all. She's just evil on her own. And they barely survive. And it ends with a cliffhanger. Those chapters end with a cliffhanger because Frodo seems to be gone. Sam learns belatedly that his master, who he thought was dead at Shelob's stinger, is actually alive, but he's in the possession of the orcs, and Sam can't reveal himself. He's carrying the One Ring. He can't deliver that to the enemy, can't fight all these orcs on his own, and that's how we end things. That's how The Two Towers ends, on a cliffhanger. And for years and years and years, when I was reading and rereading The Lord of the Rings, I so loved the epic fantasy parts, which is the first part of The Two Towers, that I was impatient with the smaller, striving fantasy of the second part, of the Hobbit parts. And time again, when I got to the end of The Two Towers, and I saw that it was a cliffhanger, I knew objectively that Tolkien had crafted a cliffhanger, but I didn't care. I just wanted to get back. I just wanted to get back to the real heroes of the book. I now see the error of my ways. Crawling through those Hobbit chapters, one chapter at a time, with David and Tony, really opened my eyes to how good they are. So, I am starting The Return of the King with a comment that I absolutely never thought I would make, which is that I miss the Hobbit chapters. I miss the heroism of the Hobbit chapters. But instead, we are back for the first part of this book. We are back to our heroes. But that scene has split as well, because as I mentioned, Gandalf breaks off from everybody else. He and Pippin head to Gondor at maximum speed. And that's where we start off here, with a long chapter called Minas Tirith, which is the capital of Gondor and the seat of the stewards of Gondor. Not the kings of Gondor, but the stewards of Gondor. The stewards, as the name implies, are holding the kingdom in trust for the return of the king. Who would be the king of Gondor in an unbroken line from Elendil and Isildur. A largely mythological figure that most people in Gondor do not believe actually they will ever see. Little do they know that is Aragorn. That is a character who was part of the Fellowship of the Ring. He's not all that far from their kingdom himself. It's just not his time. He has other things to do. Gandalf takes Pippin to Minas Tirith, and they are riding on Shadowfax. There is no saddle. There is no bridle. You ride Shadowfax at his permission. And if he consents to you riding him, he will make sure you don't fall off. And Pippin is very weary. He's not sleepless like Gandalf, and also he's been worn out by his ordeal with the Palantir. And the passage, I want to mention just briefly here that this is another example where you can tell where Tolkien accidentally, I believe, lets slip that he's a man of his time, and that he isn't actually aware of how to do what his characters are doing. He does that in a couple of other points, and this is one of them where he says, Pippin wakes up just briefly while Shadowfax is running this whole time. He's running at breakneck speed this whole time, and we're told Pippin looked out from the shelter of Gandalf's cloak. He wondered if he was awake or still sleeping, still in the swift-moving dream in which he had been wrapped for so long since the great ride began. The dark world was rushing by, and the wind sang loudly in his ears. And notice the passive tense there. The land is rushing by. He's not rushing. The land is rushing by. And he says it again. He says the same thing. He wakes up and says, "Where are we?" And Gandalf says, "In the realm of Gondor. The land of Anorion is still passing by." And I don't know how many of you have ever ridden a horse, but that is not what someone would say. That is not what you think. That's not how it feels. That's how someone who, like Tolkien, had ridden in trains through British countryside, where you look out the window, you are stationary and the country is passing by. You definitely don't have that feeling when you're riding a horse. You very much feel like you're the one who's doing the moving. Just a tiny little thing here, but gradually they get to the outer reaches of Gondor. They find a bunch of men, armed men, repairing a wall. The last of the defenses, the outer defenses of Gondor. And Gandalf tells them, "You're wasting your time. You should be sharpening your swords, not using trowels. You're too late for this. You have waited too long to make good your defenses." And he tells them that there have been battles fought to protect you. And he's going to go on to tell this to the steward of Gondor. And he says to them, the workers say to them, "The work will be finished ere evening. This is the last portion of the wall to be put in defense, the least open to attack, for it looks towards our friends of Rohan. Do you know aught of them? Will they answer the summons, think you? Yes, they will come, but they have fought many battles at your back. This road and no road looks towards safety any longer. Be vigilant. But for Gandalf's Stormcrow, you would have seen a host of foes coming out of Anorian and no riders of Rohan. And you may yet fare you well and sleep not. So he's come here with stern advice that for Gondor, that what he has seen on the fields with the king of Rohan is coming to Gondor. It's not going to hit Rohan first. It's going to hit Gondor first. And eventually, through sheer force of personality, he makes his way to Denethor, who is the steward of Gondor, in a long line of stewards. Boromir, one of the Fellowship of the Ring, who tried to take the ring from Frodo and is now dead, is Denethor's son, and so is Faramir, who we met in the Two Towers. Now we meet Denethor himself, their father, and he is a formidable figure. As Gandalf says, Gandalf makes a mention of it. Let me see if I can find it. He makes a mention of the fact that of the difference between Theoden, who we've known, the king of Rohan, and Denethor. Yes, there we go. Theoden is a kindly old man. Denethor is of another sort, proud and subtle, a man of far greater lineage and power, though he is not called a king. But he will speak most to you and question you much, since you can tell him of his son Boromir. He loved him greatly, too much perhaps, and the more so because they were unalike. But under cover of his love, he will think it easier to learn what he wishes from you rather than me. But he also mentions, Gandalf also mentions, it's after their meeting. It's after their meeting. Here, let me see if I can find it. But beg your pardon here, I didn't mark it. Yes, he is not as other men of this time, Gandalf says, about Denethor. And whatever his descent from father to son, by some chance the blood of Westernesse runs nearly true in him, as it does in his other son, Faramir, yet did not in Boromir, who he loved best. He has long sight. He can perceive, if he bends his will thither, much that is passing in the minds of men, even of those that dwell far off. It is difficult to deceive him, and dangerous to try. That is Denethor. And we saw some of that in Faramir. We've already got a taste of what this long sight is like. And once again, I point out that Gandalf is saying, no matter what his genetic descent, he doesn't use the word, but his descent from father to son, that quality seems to run stronger in Denethor than it has in, presumably, Ecthelion, or any of the people that came before him. It's strongest in him, and Gandalf would know because he's been here this whole time. He's known all of Denethor's forebears. And that element, that notice of how a very old bloodline of some kind or other that's muddling along and fairly normal suddenly crops up an extremely purified and great example of its kind is all through this book. It's actually kind of wonderful in a way when you think about it. I don't quite know. I've never read a term paper on it. I've read term papers on so many themes in this book, but not that. But that is true of Shadowfax. That is true of Denethor. And it's pretty clear that we're meant to think that's true of Aragorn. When Aragorn says, I am Isildur's heir, not Isildur himself, we're supposed to think you're as close as you're going to get. You may be greater than Isildur in your way. But anyway, they meet. And Denethor has Boromir's cloven horn in his lap. He knows that his son is dead. Quite apart from the vision that Faramir had, he knows that his son is dead. And Gandalf is right. He wants to question Pippin, not Gandalf himself, who knows everything. But before that happens, Pippin watches the two of them size each other up, and it's a really great passage. Denethor looked indeed much more like a great wizard than Gandalf did, more kingly, beautiful, and powerful, and older. Yet by a sense other than sight, Pippin perceived that Gandalf had the greater power and the deeper wisdom, and a majesty that was veiled, and he was older, far older. How much older, he wondered. And then he thought how odd it was that he had never thought about it before. Treebeard had said something about wizards, but even then he had not thought of Gandalf as one of them. What was Gandalf? In what far time and place did he come into the world, and when would he leave it? And then his musing broke off, and he saw that Denethor and Gandalf still looked at each other in the eye, as if reading the other's mind. But it was Denethor who first withdrew his gaze. And he questions Pippin at length. and then offers a kind of mealy-mouthed apology to Gandalf about doing that. And I have that point as well here. He says, and you, my lord Mithrandir, who is the elven name for Gandalf, you shall come too, and as and when you will. None shall hinder your coming to me at any time, save only in my brief hours of sleep. Let your wrath at an old man's folly run off, and then return to my comfort. And what he's referring to, the wrath he's referring to, is that Gandalf has obviously been fuming, standing there, not being asked any questions at all, while Pippin, who knows nothing, has been questioned at length solely because Denethor would find his mind easier to probe. And Gandalf says, folly? Nay, my lord, when you are a dotard, you will die. You can use even your grief as a cloak. Do you think I do not understand your purpose in questioning for an hour one who knows the least while I sit by? But it's Denethor is not cowed at all, and tells him that, here my rule is law. Unless the king comes again, my rule is law. He says it just as a reflex. He has no idea that Gandalf knows the king of Gondor. And Gandalf says, unless this is a great irate little peroration by Gandalf, one of the few revealing things about him that we learn in The Lord of the Rings. Unless the king should come again, said Gandalf, well, my lord steward, you can just hear the emphasis on the word, it is your task to keep some kingdom still against that event, which few now look to see. In that task you shall have all the aid that you are pleased to ask for. But I will say this, the rule of no realm is mine, neither Gondor nor any other, great or small. But all worthy things that are in peril, as this world now stands, those are my care. As for my part, I shall not wholly fail of my task, though Gondor should perish. If anything passes through this night that can still grow fair or bear fruit or flower again in days to come. For I also am a steward. Did you not know? It's not often that we see Gandalf quite so affronted as that. Then the entire rest of the chapter, of a long chapter, and this is a part that, again, if I have the temerity to offer a little literary criticism on J.R.R. Tolkien, the rest of the chapter is Pippin meeting a man named Baragon and Baragon's son, he's just an ordinary armed man of Gondor, in order to learn a little about what Gondor's like and what it's like to be an armed man there. We learn it mainly because Pippin has impetuously sworn fealty to Denethor, and is now effectively part of Gondor's army. He's effectively a page of the steward. Gandalf didn't know he was going to do that, but it was done, and so it can't be undone. He swore an oath. I think that's mainly the reason why we get so much of that, but we get more of it than we need. We finally end with Pippin, trying to get to sleep, and he's woken up by noises in the room that he shares with Gandalf. He sees that Gandalf has withdrawn a whole bunch of scrolls and writings from, I guess, the Gondor Public Library, and is studying them, but we don't know what Gandalf's been doing while he's been gone. Apparently he's been so busy that he can't even tend to Shadowfax, which is kind of weird because we don't have any sense that he's doing anything all that important. Studying documents? He's not talking with Denethor. We know that. There's no one else in the city that he would want to talk to. It's not like the city has a wizard of its own. None of the rest of the Fellowship or any of the heroes that we've met in the Two Towers are here. That's an open question. I don't know what Tolkien fanatics would say. What is Gandalf doing for his first day in Gondor? I don't know, nor can I think of what he would be doing that would be more important than tending to Shadowfax, who's just borne him 150 leagues in no time at all. Or talking with Denethor, for Pete's sake, even if they don't like each other. I don't know what that is, but it gives the chapter a distinctly anticlimactic feeling. Especially, I hate to say this, I can't believe I'm saying this, especially compared to the narrative compactness and focus of the Hobbit chapters at the end of the Two Towers. There is no waste in most of those chapters, almost not at all. Now I see that, and I'm wondering, well, anyway, I'm intentionally restricting myself to one chapter a day, so we're going to move on. We're going to move on to the next chapter. I'm hoping that it will be tomorrow. The next chapter changes our narrative focus again, and we go back to, it's called The Passing of the Grey Company. So we'll be changing our focus from Gandalf and Pippin. We'll be moving back to the rest of our heroes, but not Sam and Frodo. So that is The Return of the King. I guess by popular demand, I will be reading The Return of the King a chapter at a time. Glad you're all enjoying this. I certainly am. But I'm going to wrap this up for now, and I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.